Leonardo watches nothing but a smelly, worthless peasant who has literally nothing to his name and wishes he was more important to life. He prays to God every day in hopes that he will bless him with some kind of secret ability that will make girls notice him for once, so he can end his poor and lonely existence just like you. Lol. Or even gift him with a special superhero power so he can become a high-value man. Leonardo lives in the middle of nowhere and hasn't spoken to anyone in many years, but he misses his little sister and writes letters to her saying that he will visit her and become the brother that she deserves. After, we see Leonardo, who arrives at this modernized New York City, a beautiful concrete jungle with no immediate threat, until randomly, one day, the entire city was obliterated by these giant meteors from the sky which destroyed the city. Little did he know, Leonardo's world was experiencing a sci-fi collision of two worlds, which blasted New York and turned it into Nuked York, or otherwise known in the anime as Hellsalem's Lot. This other world that collided with Earth was named the Beyond, or the Underworld. And the aliens from that place say that the event was just as chaotic for them as it was for the humans. They came crashing down from the sky and started blasting missiles, and monsters were ripping people apart. No one could stop the chaos which was unfolding right in front of their eyes. But this revolution made regular humans want to turn into superhero freaks, like this cool-looking sniper dude, or this insane white-haired ninja, which Leonardo strives to become, as he wants nothing more than to be a powerful hero, to make his life worth it. But he knows he's nothing but a little weakling loser, so he tries to forget about it all, and just stick to his 9-to-5 corpy day job of being a stupid photographer. But when the two worlds collided, no one actually knows why this happened or what caused it. But the strange collision connected the two worlds, and Hellsalem's Lot became the city of chaos which housed humans and Beyondians alike. Around the same time, Leonardo's family was visiting New York in hopes of finding a cure for his siblings' vegetable legs. Sister's disability. Just then, a god from beyond appears in front of them and asks who will see through the end, and explains that it wants one of the siblings to take his all-seeing eyes, which will give this weak loser the ability to bind himself with God, so God will be able to see and record all the events that will happen during this historic moment of this collision of worlds. Leo's sister, Miss Hella, says that it can give the eyes to her brother, but as a result, it makes his sister blind, as this was the price of giving him these OP eyes. But Leo is even angrier now, as his poor sister is now even more of a than before, and even more of a cabbage. But God tells him that he now has these cool and creepy eyes that come with some ancient anime sound effects, and he now has the ability to see everything. The transplantation caused him a lot of pain, and it took him 3 weeks to get used to these new babies, but he managed to live through it. After that, he decided to go to this Gotham of a city in hopes of finding some alien cure that would enable his now blind and disabled sister to see and walk again. He arrives at Hellsalem's Lot and decides to work as a freelance journalist, but being the loser he is, barely manages to afford filling his stomach. 6 months later, we see him sitting down at Vivian's diner and talking to her before she takes pity on him as he's a little broke boy wagey. So she gives him a free burger to eat in exchange for doing some dishes. Just then, a supersonic speed monkey jumps in front of him and zooms away with his camera. Leonardo manages to see it in slow-mo thanks to his eyes and starts running after the thief into the streets. After that, he lives through a series of coincidences as an armed robbery is carried out at his side by an alien, and the blast from its hand sends him and the monkey flying right in front of this silver-haired guy, who happens to be Zap Renfro of Libra, which is an organization of vigilantes comprising of people with superhuman powers. It turns out, Zap was looking for a guy named Johnny Landis, who was supposed to join them and looked really similar to Leonardo. Leo decided to take advantage of this misunderstanding and followed him to his base and got caught when they found out that he wasn't the right guy. Leo thinks that if there was to be some magical cure that could heal his veggie sister, then it must be hidden somewhere which only strong organizations like Libra could access. After getting caught, he apologizes and tries to explain his motive. But just then, the news starts playing and it shows the police catching the alien robber from earlier. But suddenly, a figure comes out of its body and slashes everyone around him, and the channel switches to a creepy guy known as Femto, who claims to be one of the self-proclaimed 13 kings of this city and looks like a cheap Joker from Batman. He says that he has released a demon called Yog-G-Fot in 2 pieces, and the representatives of humanity must find its other half before the demon does, unless they want the city to be destroyed. He gives them a clue that a gate would open every few minutes, and the other half of the demon would appear and slash everything around it before vanishing. And just then the monkey that took Leo's camera starts shining, and the other half of the demon appears and cuts the office building down. After the attack, Zap grabs Leo up and asks if he was an agent of Femto, but his colleague Chain jumps in and explains that Klaus decided to protect him, which means he's a good person. She then deduces that the gate to the demon must be on the monkey and starts chasing after it as it jumps off the building. Klaus notices that Leo was able to see that high-speed attack and asks if it was thanks to his eyes, and he starts explaining everything from how he got them. He curses his cowardness and how it led to his sister going blind. But then the police jump in with their helicopters and cut his story short. They send out their battle robots and try to arrest them by pinning this whole chaos on Libra. But Klaus decides to take care of it by himself and asks Leo to join their organization in exchange for their help with achieving his goal, and then walks forward to showcase his sick brain grid-style blood martial arts, Form 11, Twisting Storm technique, which solidifies his blood and slashes everything around him in a twister. He then tells Leo and Zap to put an end to Femto's plan. They both get on Leo's scooter and start racing towards the monkey. On their way, Leo says that he doesn't think the gate was planted on the monkey because it didn't split open like the robber they saw earlier. Just then, they get a message from Chain, who says that the monkey is headed their way and the gate is about to reappear, so they should be careful. As she says that, the highway and the buildings around them get cut up and Leo falls down in front of his favorite diner, which is now in ruins. He sees Vivian and her dad still alive, under the collapsed rubble, and decides to get serious about ending this stupid game. He stands up and starts walking forward as the first half of the demon jumps in front of him and prepares to attack. But just before he turns into sashimi, Zap protects him by knocking him back. He then tells him that he likes that determined look on his face and hands him a pistol and prepares to use his own special martial arts as the demon turns towards the monkey. His fighting style is called Star-Style Blood Arts, Blade from Number 1, Blade of Flame, which solidifies his blood into a sharp blade. He then uses it to slash the demon in half and lets Leo run towards the monkey, before blasting the demon with a net of flames using his 7th Hell technique. On the other hand, Leo uses his eyes to zoom in and pinpoint a flea on the monkey, with the gate planted on it, and shoots it down with godly accuracy thanks to his eyes. With that, he ruins Femto's plans and succeeds in saving the city on his very first mission as a member of Libra. After dealing with this incident, he returns to Vivian's diner, who seems to be operating from its ruins, and says that he still has to do the dishes as he promised. Besides that, he also ends up making friends with the supersonic monkey. A few weeks later, we see Leonardo driving around this crazy mess of a city, working as a pizza delivery boy. His first order for the day seems to be for a hot vampire hunter by the name of Zap Renfro, and his address seems to be a not-so-family-friendly place. After making the delivery, Leo starts running away because he knows Zap is going to annoy him for the rest of the day, and it comes true when all of his deliveries end up being made to him, but at different places in the city. After having his fun, Zap tells Leo to drop him off at his apartment in exchange for him promising not to bother him again for the day. Leo agrees and they start driving to his place, but on their way, Leo notices a weird-looking man with a couple of aliens smuggling human bodies, who are apparently using high-level stealth magic to disguise themselves as a dry cleaning business. Leo sees through them thanks to his all-seeing eyes and tries to drive away in hopes of not getting caught in the mess. He tells Zap about what he saw and lets him put Chain after them. But just then, their scooter gets attacked by the disguised alien, who says that no one could see through their stealth and that it would be a big issue for them if word about their real business got out. He kidnaps Leo so he can cut him up and see how he was able to see through their spell, and leaves Zap to die. But before he can get away, Zap manages to put some of his blood on Leo's clothes and tells Chain to follow after them. Back in the van, Leo opens his eyes and finds himself all tied up in front of his kidnappers. He asks them if the people in the bags were alive, and they say that they were being transported illegally as vacuum-sealed food for freshness. The alien that cast the stealth magic comes forward and checks Leo's eyes to figure out how he managed to see through his spell, and finds out that he has the much-valued all-seeing eyes of God. On the other hand, we see Libra's vice leader, Steven, calm Chain down on the phone as she cries about losing their target. Meanwhile, the alien tells Leo that he can't wait to butcher him after finishing his job to see what else he has got inside of him as they make their way to Beyond. He wonders what he can do to escape from there and decides to use the special abilities of his eyes. He first uses it to project his view to the aliens in the van and makes them look at the monkey dancing in front of him. This makes them really mad and they decide to put him down, but once they are in his field of view, he uses his other ability, which switches their views with each other and makes them nauseous, causing the driver to crash the van. At the same time, we see Chain go to the hospital to see if Zap was alright, and the doctor says that something strange was up with him because whenever they try to transfuse blood it disappears. She relays this information to Klaus and he says that Zap is a genius and he is tracking the kidnappers by extending a super thin line of blood from his body to the blood that he left on Leonardo. He then tells her to follow the trail at her best speed as soon as Zap lights it up. Meanwhile, he gets ready to follow her GPS signal in his Batmobile alongside Steven and his butler, Gilbert. As planned, Zap ignites the blood trail with his lighter and Chain follows it at Mach speeds using her werewolf genes, and they all make it in time to save Leonardo as he crashes the van. Steven deals with the van monster using his Esmeralda blood freeze technique while Klaus fights the kidnappers using Form 111, Lance of Annihilation, and destroys their otherworldly asses. After that, they capture all of them and rescue 19 missing people, bringing this case to a close. On the other hand, we see Leonardo all wrapped up in bandages from his injuries as Steven praises him for bringing this stealth magic to light, and tells him about how this has caused a massive uproar in both worlds. While thinking about all of this, Leonardo wonders if this was the reason why Zap was sticking with him all day so that he won't come in any harm because of his eyes, but then calls him a jerk for annoying him anyways. A few weeks after that, Leo starts making some recovery and the doctor tells him to stay at the hospital for a few more days so they can do some tests and make sure that he is alright. Leo uses this time to walk around the hospital and ends up finding a graveyard at the back of the hospital. He says that it's a pretty sick joke, pun intended. But then a white-haired girl starts laughing and he looks to his side to see her sitting on a structure. She introduces herself as White and seems to know who Leonardo is. She asks him if he would like to be her friend and says that she is actually a ghost. Hearing this, Leo snaps a picture of her and catches her lie. She starts laughing and jumps down and they both end up becoming friends. It turns out she has been suffering from a disease since the collision of the two worlds and has been stuck at the hospital for the last 3 years. She feels extremely bored with only having her brother to talk to and feels glad to have finally made a friend like Leo. On the other hand, Leo also feels blessed to have made friends with a cutie like her. After some day, Leo gets discharged and goes back to his daily life. One day, he gets woken up by a bird flying into his face right inside his room. He wonders where it came from before looking at his side and realizing that the whole wall was missing. His contractor walks in and explains that he has decided to turn the property into a luxury hotel, and as per the forced eviction clause in his contract, he has 40 seconds to leave with his stuff before he kicks him out by force. With nowhere else to go, Leo crashes at Libra's office and struggles with his sleeping schedule. Steven suggests that he takes them up on their increased salary options, but he refuses, saying he would only accept what he works for. Sometime later, Zap walks in and sits right on top of Leo with some blood on his face. He explains that he got in a fight with some hooligan who came right at him out of nowhere. He cut his neck off, but the guy still charged at him, which surprised him quite a bit. He wonders how a human being managed to pull it off, and Steven says that it must be the doing of the recent drug that they are studying called Angel Scale. It is a synthetic drug which can temporarily change a human's physiology and give them some insane strength and tenacity buffs. It's really expensive and reeks of some nefarious plots. Just then, Chain presents a recording that she made in secret which shows a human transforming into a monster-like creature and attempting murder of the US president. She explains that the video was from the outside world and they fear that someone might be smuggling the drug outside of Hellsalem's lot. Seeing this, Steven tells Chain to go find out what the mob thinks about the situation and tells Zap to go get more information out of the dealers. After that, he turns to Klaus and asks if he was okay with it, but he seems to be busy with playing some online alien chess-like game called Prosfair. Meanwhile, the monkey looks at Zap and hints towards Leo getting suffocated under his ass, making him get up and wonder if he's still alive. With that, they all get up and run around the town to gather more information on this case, but end up with nothing of use. With nowhere else to go, Klaus decides to use his underworld connections to get a lead, and for this, he decides to ask for help from one of the leading mob bosses of Beyond, Don. Before he goes to his place, he goes outside to pick up a member of Libra named KK, who was ambushed by some people recently. Callus picks her up and fills her in on the situation and tells her to accompany him alongside Gilbert to Don's house. Once they are there, they become surprised to see Prosfair Grandmaster Olchenko standing outside the Don's house. Klaus tries to tell the man that it is a dangerous place, but he is hell-bent on challenging the infamous Don to a game and winning it. KK notes that in normal circumstances, someone like Don would never entertain them, but he seems to be a crazy Prosfair fan and has set up a rule where he would grant one wish of anyone who manages to beat him. When they come face to face with the Don, Klaus tries to persuade him to reject Olchenko's challenge because he's a great asset to humanity, and losing him would be really unfair. But before he can say something else, Olchenko says that it's very disrespectful of him to assume that he would lose and walks towards Don in order to start the game. But before he goes, Klaus suggests that he forgets about trying to checkmate the mob boss, but Olchenko pays little attention to it and says that he's there to win. After that, Don extends a different dimension with only him and Olchenko inside it, and they begin their game. Olchenko says that he requires nuclear weapons for his country, and asks that the people who saw him coming inside should be disposed of, while referring to Klaus and KK. Don accepts it and says that it would require him to play a game that is at least 10 hours long. In this time, if he manages to keep his sanity without losing, push a draw, or win by checkmating him, then he would be considered the winner, but if he loses, then Don would take the rest of his life for his own. Olchenko agrees and their game begins. On the outside, KK says that Olchenko might be able to make it out alive as he is a grandmaster in the game, and even Klaus managed to make it out of there 4 times already, but he says that all of those times he barely managed to stall the game for the allotted time, and not once did he ever win against Don. The game continues for 9 hours and 58 minutes, but Olchenko gets checkmated by Don and is thrown out of the game dimension like a brain-dead zombie. He finds out that Don has been playing the game for over 12 years now, and there's no way a human can ever defeat him. Don thanks him for the good game and then decides to fulfill their contract by taking his brain out, but Klaus jumps in and stops him. He apologizes for his rude behavior and makes a request that Don hold off Olchenko's killing until after their game is done. Don says that he would never accept that from anyone else, but given how they are old friends, he would allow it, and says that he would have to entertain him in a game for 99 hours if he wanted him to spare Olchenko's life. Klaus agrees and walks into the game dimension to begin their game. While doing so, Don asks for his other request as well, and Klaus says that he wants all the information around the angle scale drug and its distribution. Don says that he would fulfill that request as well if he manages to win, draw, or stall the game for 99 hours and begin the game. While playing, he wonders what kind of a man Klaus is, who is willing to put his life on the line for strangers, and every time he comes to him, he wants information about something that changes the fate of the world, like this drug. He tells Klaus about Olchenko's request to dispose of him and asks if he is still worth saving, but Klaus says that people are weak and make bad decisions out of that weakness, but that doesn't mean he let their drawbacks weigh him and his moral values down as well. The game continues for hours on end, and finally, after 99 brutal hours, Don lets Klaus out and holds his end of the bargain by giving them all the information and sparing Olchenko's life. KK relays this information to Steven, and Libra manages to shut down the drug in one night. Some days later, we see Leonardo taking a train to get to the office. On his way, he meets a boy and strikes up some conversation with him about the kind of entities that live in Hellsalem's lot. He explains that there are roughly 25% humans in the city, with 50% of the population being from the beyond. The other 20% consists of things that nobody knows what the hell they are, and the remaining 5% consists of people that cannot be seen through normal eyes and are considered really dangerous. It turns out this boy is from those 5% as well. After that, Leonardo gets off the train and goes about his business as usual, and ends up at a bar with Klaus and the others, who are there to greet some other members of the organization. They chill out and enjoy their time, and Klaus asks Leonardo how things were going for him since the last incident. He explains that he has been getting used to the job, while some of the shady aspects of it are still hard to understand for him. He then adds that just today, he saw some people that gave off a bright red wing-shaped light, and this makes everyone present stop in their tracks and get close to the young boy. Steven takes out a red paper and asks if that light was the same shade, and he confirms, which makes everyone there uncomfortable. Zap explains that those people are called blood breeds, or vampires as we know them. They tend to feed on the blood of other creatures, and humans seem to be their favorite food. Normally, people can't see them or find out their true nature. They also don't show up on any cameras or recordings, so gathering information about them is really hard. But thanks to Leonardo's eyes, they might be able to change all that and finally gain the upper hand in this battle. After saying that, they all wonder if they will have to call the infamous vampire hunter, Blitz, and then worry that he might come anyways given how crazy he is about killing blood breeds. After that, Zap and Leonardo go to the airport to receive the infamous guest, and Zap explains that Blitz Abrams is nicknamed Lucky Abrams because of his insane luck. He's a really smart detective and vampire hunter, and because of that, the vampires have put hundreds of curses on him. But due to his crazy luck, the mishaps that are meant to hurt him get deflected in the most absurd of ways and often end up causing issues for people around him. To make things even worse, he seems to be completely oblivious about this fact and continues to think that it is all normal. Just then, we see Blitz walking out of the airport as a plane crashes behind him and goes up in flames. After that, he meets up with Zap and Leo on the road and causes a truck to get hit by a big alien, and a big piece of glass flies out and gets stuck in Zap's skull. Blitz walks up to them and says that this city is as dangerous and crazy as always, and greets both of them before picking Leonardo up and going to the office to meet Klaus and the others. Klaus seems to hold him in high regards and thinks of him as his mentor, while the others think of him as a catastrophic genius. After saying his greetings, he takes out a suitcase and shows a hand inside of it that seems to be holding onto a piece of paper. He tells Leonardo to take a look at it with his eyes and explains that the paper seems to hold the names of the 13 elders. He further explains that the 13 elders refer to the 13 strongest blood breeds that have unique powers and are considered to be at the top of their ranking system. Their organization has only come across one of them in all their existence, and it cost a lot of lives to get that little bit of information on that paper. To vampires, their names are sacred and one can say them to seal them once and for all. Leonardo takes a look and sees some characters, but then his vision starts getting bright, and he feels pain in his eyes. After that, they go to the center of the city called Abridged Central, and it takes us to the lowest point in this world that is closest to beyond. People think that the 13 elders reside in that pit called the Eternal Nothingness, and Blitz wants Leonardo to confirm if that's the case or not. Leo takes a look down and all the information overload his eyes and brain until his vision cracks and eyes start bleeding. He gets down and says that it's not even a matter of 10 seconds or 20 seconds as the whole place was covered in red, noting how it's filled with elder class blood breeds. While they are busy doing this experiment, Steven and KK head towards Stomcrete Avenue Station, where a couple of elders have shown themselves while feeding on some humans. The FBI asks for their help as they are getting obliterated by them. Steven and KK walk inside the station and find both of them after defeating a couple of their ghouls easily. After that, they engage in a 2 versus 1 battle against the girl blood breed, who easily beats both their asses and laughs at their petty magic tricks, referring to their blood martial arts. She explains that their special techniques might have a poisonous effect on the blood breeds, but it's nowhere near enough to overcome their regenerative powers. While this is happening, Klaus and the others hurry towards their location in hopes of sealing the blood breed using Leo's eyes, which enables him to see their true names. The fight continues until it looks like Steven and KK are done for, but then Klaus jumps off the train and beats the man down and then uses his brain grid form 999 Eternal Coffin prison seal while saying the girl blood breed Jerica's name and seals her into a tiny blood cross. After that, they all walk out with Steven and KK's beat up asses and get back to their daily routines. Leonardo decides to go pay White a visit at the hospital and finds out that she was hiding in the graveyard because she got bored being locked up in her hospital room. Leonardo walks her back to the room and she seems mad at him for some reason. He tries to ask her, but she simply pouts and ignores him. After that, he goes back to his delivery duty and wonders what she was mad about while getting bullied by Zap as always. He offers to grab something to eat together and starts driving him to a food corner, but on their way they become victim to a living monster truck that starts following them and eating everything in its way. The incident soon starts getting broadcasted on the TV, and Klaus and Blitz immediately understand that it is none other than one of the 13 kings of the city, named Aligura, the Queen of Monomania. They think that she must have decided to get her boyfriend back and goes to Hellsalem's Lot's largest prison to break him out. The man turns out to be a hybrid who has 2 people living in one body, which officially and logically earns him the right to be the only person to be able to use the they, them pronouns and not if someone questioned their sanity. The handsome guy's name is Dog, while the living blood alien inside his veins is named Brody, and they are basically the cheap copy of Venom from the Craigslist of Spider-Man universe. They are often kept bound in the prison, but sometimes Libra asks for their help with their cases. Klaus opens their seal and tells them that their crazy girlfriend is coming to get them. On the other hand, we see Leonardo flying into the air from one of the crazy jumps that Zap makes with the scooter, and he ends up literally hanging by a thread at the monster truck. Just then, Aligura walks out and captures him and says that he would be a good company for her as she was getting bored. She then starts rambling about how she had the perfect boyfriend, but he was simply ugly. So she went and found the hottest guy she could find and then chopped up her boyfriend into a blood mess and put him into the handsome guy's body after draining his blood out. This way she brought the man of her dreams into reality with the perfect personality and the perfect looks. Hearing this, Leonardo confirms that she is just as crazy as your average girlfriend and starts wishing for Klaus to come in and save him like always. Meanwhile, Aligura manages to find Dog and Brody traveling with Klaus. She calls out to them, but they turn into their Venom form and punch the truck down with their full force. The attack slows the truck down but also sends them kilometers away from the rebound. Seeing this, Steven makes a plan and calls Leonardo and tells him to use his ability to make the monster truck go towards the local park. Once it's facing the park, KK, Steven and Klaus make it get out of control and fly over to the park where Dog is waiting for it alongside Zap. He gathers all of his copyrighted strength and then blows the truck away in one hit, sending it outside of the city while raining down thousands of its metallic pieces on the people of Hellsalem's Lot, killing hundreds if not thousands. After that, everyone gets back to their usual routine and Leonardo ends up at the hospital with some stitches. On his way out, he sees White talking to a doctor and laughing and feels jealous. Being the beta male he is, he decides to quietly walk out but then grows a pair and goes back inside and breaks her out of the hospital and takes her out for a movie. It looks like she has been craving such a relationship with him as well, and they both get a little bit closer. On the other hand, we see the same boy that Leonardo met at the train station reveal himself to be the King of Despair and being in cahoots with Femto. It turns out that they were behind enticing Aligura to go after the dog and cause all this chaos in the city. A few days later, we see Leonardo hanging around the 42nd Street, which is an unchanged area in Halsalem's lot which still holds parts of the old New York City. The government here makes sure to keep the Beyondians outside of here, and that's why lots of humans have a prejudice against the monster-like aliens. Leonardo happens to be there to get himself a burger from a popular franchise called Jack and Rockets. As he walks out of the street, he notices a mushroom-like alien run towards him and get run over by a truck. Leonardo worries for his life, but the alien simply gets back up and asks if he can have those burgers. He says that he does not have a skeleton like humans, so physical impacts don't harm him in the same way. Just then, the two drivers of the truck walk out and start talking down to the alien, asking if he can't see or something. Leonardo tries to defend him from this racism, but the guys give the alien a half-eaten burger as settlement and drive off. After that, Leo also goes back to the office and delivers Zap's lunch order. A few days later, we see Leo once again running Zap's errands, and he ends up meeting the alien once again looking for people with the burgers. It turns out he has made a deal with the truck drivers who sell him the burgers for 4 times the usual price. Leo sees this and says that it's unfair and tells the alien that he would buy the burgers for him instead without any markup. He says that he hates racism and wants to take a step forward, and this marks the beginning of their friendship. The alien introduces itself as Nej, and they go on to eat a lot of burgers in the next few weeks. One day, while sitting at the park, Nej mentions that he does not remember his parents but knows who they are supposed to be. What makes it worse is that his mother also doesn't remember giving birth to him, and this has made him really lonely. Leo feels really sad for him and gives him a special poster that comes with the burgers if you order a large amount of them, which makes Nej really happy like a fanboy of the franchise. On the other hand, we find out that the truck drivers were actually under a huge debt, and were being threatened by a mafia collector to pay up soon. On their way back home, they run into Nej and instead of apologizing, take their anger out on him by beating the hell out of his mushroomy face. One of them happens to be wearing a gas mask because the other one peed himself after getting threatened with his life by the mafia collector. As they beat Nej, he starts turning red and suddenly explodes in a cloud of spores that cause everyone there to collapse. The next day, we find out that all of those people lost their memories from the last 13 hours, and it makes the news. As it reaches Libra's ears, they decide to look into it, but Leo immediately starts running towards 42nd Street to find out if Nej was alright. At first he can't find him there, but then he remembers his home address and decides to look for him there. Soon enough, he meets up with him and asks if he was alright and remembers him or not. Nej says that he does remember him and then shows him the poster that Leo gave him and says that it's a really cool poster, but he doesn't know how it got in his pocket. This makes Leo realize that Nej lost some of his memories as well. Just then, someone comes from behind him and knocks him unconscious with a baseball bat. When he opens his eyes, he finds out that it is none other than the same two drivers from earlier. The one with the gas mask didn't lose his memories from the incident and made up a plan to beat Nej once again to get his spores and use them on the mafia collector to make him forget about their debt. Leo tries to stop them by using his eye's powers, but it doesn't last long. Nej says that he will not get angry, so he doesn't forget about Leo, but when the baseball guy knocks Leo out with his bat again, this makes Nej pop and release a nuclear cloud of spores that erases the memories of everyone in a huge radius around them for up to 2 weeks. From this incident, both Nej and Leo forget about everything regarding each other, and Leo even forgets about some members of Libra. It takes some time for him to recover from his injuries, and Klaus and the others fill him in on the details until one day Leo runs into Nej once again out of sheer luck. They exchange a similar fate as they did when they first met and get to exchange a burger once again. After that, Leo goes to the hospital to see White and ends up meeting with her brother, who turns out to be the same guy he talked to on the train not so long ago. The guy introduces himself as Black and says that this is the first time they met each other and seems to be speaking the truth. They both head out to have lunch together and quickly become friends as they find a lot of commonalities between themselves, like being scrawny, wimpy losers who care a lot about their younger sister and are trying their best to live in this crazy world. Leo also finds out that White has a bad heart and that's why she is at the hospital and feels sad. Just then, Vivian drops a cup of coffee over him as a kid runs into her, but the coffee starts floating in the air instead of falling over him. It turns out Black has this psychic power, but he can't control it very well and ends up dropping the coffee over Leo anyways. After that, Leo goes back to the office and finds Zap getting his ass beat up as he tries to kill Klaus and prove his superiority like always. The next day, Leo comes to the office and notes that Zap isn't there. He asks about it and they all wonder if he finally gave up on beating Klaus and accepted defeat, but just then he video calls Leo on his phone and says that he has been taken hostage by some people who are trying to kill him. He asks Klaus for help and cuts the call, and we find out that he was just pretending to be in trouble and in reality had made a bet with the owner of an underground hand-to-hand fighting arena to whom he owes a huge debt. He says that Klaus will definitely come and fight for him given how he cares about his friends and would defeat all of his people in the ring. The owner takes him up on this offer and we see Klaus heading towards the arena with Leo. Once there, he gets inside the ring and says that he's there to get his colleague back, but the announcer says that he must defeat a number of opponents and then he can take his guy back. Klaus agrees and his first fight begins with a blonde human fighter. He knocks him down in one punch and then goes on to face a multi-limbed alien monster. Klaus throws a barrage of punches and then twists all of its limbs like a cockroach. After that, he faces a bunch of opponents and beats them up in a similar manner. Watching him fight so elegantly, the owner of the ring gets excited and jumps down from the booth and into the ring. He faces Klaus and requests a duel and they both start fighting. He notes how his fighting style resembles that of a Spartan with a spear and a shield. He attacks with HSI right and keeps up a strong defense with his left but doesn't resort to grabbing or pushing or pulling techniques. He calls him naive and continues to exchange blows with him until Klaus decides to use his left hand to punch him and ends up blowing his head apart. This surprises everyone, but we find out that the owner of the arena is actually a blood breed who was using the corpse as a cover so he could fight Klaus and have some fun. He then knocks him back and lets him get out of the arena with Zap, safe and sound. Once they are outside, Klaus shakes Zap's hand and says that he's glad that he is safe. This annoys Leo a lot as he knows that Zap took advantage of Klaus' generosity, but Zap says that while getting rid of his debt was a part of it. His real objective was to attack Klaus when he was weakened from fighting all these big shots in the underground. He then jumps at him like usual, but Klaus beats his ass up just as easily as always. After this, Leo decides to go back home and on his way meets Black and gives him a ride as well. Before leaving, Black thanks him and tells him to continue looking after his sister and then lets Leo drive away. Once he's gone, he walks back and grabs a coat from the stands outside the building and walks inside to greet Femto and some other beings of the underworld and reveals his other identity as the King of Despair as his eye color shifts from blue to red. After this, we get a flashback of Black's memories and find out that both his parents died in the collision of the two worlds. His real name is William and his sister is called Mary. With that, we get to the point where we see him and Leo walking around Hellsalem's Lot's museum. He explains that when the collision happened 3 years ago, a group of special people called casters were gathered from both worlds and they used their powers to contain the collision and stop it from spreading by extending a psychic barrier around it. The center of that collision is still being researched to this day and many of the researchers involved are from that group of casters. He tells Leo that his parents were among them as well, but they are no more. After that, we cut back to Zap and his daily routine of degeneracy. He wakes up with a bad hangover from the previous night after having a fling with a woman. He then goes to a fast food restaurant and gets himself some foods that are rich in vitamin, diabetes, and heart attack. He then goes to watch horse races and bet on them. After losing there, he mugs some thugs who try to bug him and then goes to a casino and wastes all of his money there before spending the night with a girl. He then wakes up with a bad hangover and goes to a fast food chain and repeats. This time around, he ends up finding a hot employee at KFC and decides to ask for her number. The girl rejects him, but he keeps bothering her and continues his glutinous routine until he grows a big belly. After failing to get her number, he becomes desperate and continues bothering her even more until one day, Shane jumps over his fat belly and says that her friend who works at KFC told her that this dumb silver-haired guy keeps bothering her for her number and she can't stand him anymore. After that, they both start arguing, but Steven tells them to stay quiet as they have confirmed that a blood breed gate was opening in India, and a blood breed walked through it alongside a hunter. Their destination must be this city, and according to the report, the blood breed lost more than half of its body while fighting this hunter. It also says that the whole Air Force base in Gwalior was sealed off as everyone inside was turned into a ghoul, which means they are fighting a really strong blood breed possibility in the elder class breed. That's why they are asking for Klaus to help seal the monster instead of taking it down, and they wonder who this hunter is that is going after such a strong vampire. Just then, KK reports that she sees their target at the top of the castle in the Sky building, and we see the two monsters fighting like Superman and destroying everywhere they step on. KK, she and Steven save a kid from getting turned into a squash patty and then head towards the fighters facing each other. Thanks to the reflection from the glass behind them, they manage to figure out who the blood breed was and attack it with their abilities. But for some reason, the hunter suddenly starts chasing after Zap down the street. This confuses KK and Steven, but then they see the blood breed break off its attack organs and start regenerating. This makes them worried as they prepare for a deadly assault from the vampire. But then the hunter turns around and uses the same Big Dipper blood battle style that Zap uses in combination with the wind element as well, and reduces the vampire to its final stage known as Gen Tai Dem. In this stage, the vampire regenerates itself in an egg-like state which has many eyes and will automatically attack anything that comes close to it. Seeing this, Steven realizes that this hunter is none other than the famous blood battle god and the founder of the Big Dipper blood battle style, Raju. He is also Zap's master and is said to often go missing for decades, during which people hear a lot about someone killing strong vampires. Raju uses his blood arts and takes over Zap's mouth and uses it to talk down to everyone around him by calling them a greenhorn. Soon Klaus and the others join them and he acknowledges Klaus' strength but says that he still lacks in terms of being a leader while pointing towards Zap's big belly and calls him a disgusting piece of filth. He says that if someone were to put dirt and filth inside a bag and then throw it in a garbage dump, it would still not be as disgusting as this undisciplined piece of disheveled scum who only eats and farts. He says that at this rate even the bugs that he squashes under his non-existent feet are better than him and says that he would take him back under him and train him properly. Hearing this, Klaus and the others say that Zap is without a doubt an annoying loser, but at the same time he's an irreplaceable part of their organization and request him to reconsider his decision. Raju thinks about it and says that if Zap manages to unarm the Gen Tidan by destroying all its eyes, then he would let him stay with Libra, otherwise he would drag his untidy ass back to the jungle and train him like Garp trained Luffy. Klaus says that it would be hard for even Zap, but Zap steps up and says that if his master says that he has to do it, then there must be a good reason for that, and decides to do it. He walks right in front of the egg and Raju sets up a blood barrier around them to contain the damage while keeping Zap inside. Zap tries to take a step forward but the egg attacks him and he barely manages to keep his head. He starts crying thinking he would die, but then remembers what would happen if he fails to do so and how his master is an evil masochist who enjoys torturing him in the name of training and tries to motivate himself. But this ends up making him even more depressed and he starts losing hope, but then Chain pretends that she got a call from her friend from KFC who seems to be interested in Zap now and wants him right now. Hearing this, Zap unlocks the Sanji within him and disarms the egg with superhuman speed and focus, making even Raju surprised. He says that regardless of his undisciplined nature, Zap is his most talented student and tries to praise him, but Zap simply walks past him and takes Chain's phone to talk to her friend but realizes that it was just a false alarm. Meanwhile, we see Black talking White at the hospital and he seems to worry about having a dual personality that he can't control, and that might have taken over him occasionally, alluding to how Leonardo once said that he met him at a train station before as well. White tries to calm him down and says that he's just overthinking it and that she is there to support him always. Back at the where Libra and others are at, Leo tries to look at the vampire egg and find its true name, but he says that he can't find its heart anywhere inside. Raju says that it must be in the other half of the blood breed's body, and that his other student should be on his way there with it. Back at the hospital, Black decides to go outside and put some flowers at his parents' grave, and then ends up talking to his other personality inside his head. They argue about not using White in any evil schemes as Black tells it that it was part of their deal, but the King of Despair says that he isn't making her do anything, and that she is doing it herself. After that, he puts Black to sleep and takes over him. He then says that it's the time for this great collapse and sets his evil plan in motion. On the other hand, we see an airplane entering Hellsalem's lot from the sea. The local air defense authorities warn it to turn back, but then they notice the half-torn upper body of a blood breed attached at the front of the plane. As it enters Hellsalem's lot, a huge tentacle from the sea comes out and crushes the plane, making the cockpit fly further inside the city. With all the members of Libra in place, Dog jumps and destroys the cockpit and slams it into the ground. After that, Klaus picks Leo up and rushes towards the crash site alongside Zap so they can know its name and seal it once and for all. The regenerating vampire attacks them immediately, but Klaus defends against it using his blood cross. KK buys them some time by shooting the vampire down, and Leo uses this time to get the name of the vampire. After that, Dog picks him up and jumps further down the building to get him to safety. On the other hand, Zap tries to find the junior disciple of his master who was supposed to be in the plane, and he cuts his way out and reveals himself to be a fishman. This makes Zap laugh his ass off as he compares him to sushi and Japanese sweets, which makes the other guy really mad. He introduces himself as Zed, and he is the inheritor of the wind element of the Big Dipper blood battle style, just like Zap is the fire element inheritor of the technique. They both manifest their blood blades and try to pin the vampire down, but it unleashes its insane blood breed haki, and then calls its lower half towards itself, which was sealed inside the Gen Tai Dam. Zed shoots his spear at it and says that the rest is up to Raju, but Raju simply looks down without doing anything, and lets the vampire combine with its lower half. Just then, they both realize that their master wants them to deal with it on their own as a team, and they both use their strongest abilities just like Raju did earlier to seal the vampire. As they damage the vampire, Klaus jumps down and uses his form 999 and seals the elder class breed into a small blood cross by saying its name. After this, he commends Libra on their teamwork and coordination and says that he would like them to take care of Zed, and then runs away like y'all's dad who went out to get milk and never came back. Zed instantly collapses from the shock and Klaus and the others take him in and let him rest. Meanwhile, we see the King of Despair setting his plan in motion and watching this whole incident alongside Femto and Aligura. He mocks them and says that they are easily entertained while he needs something so chaotic to happen that it changes the fate of this world. He then asks Aligura if she managed to find the device he was looking for, and she gives him a pair of glasses which are meant to take someone else's eyeballs. He then thanks her and walks to the hospital and gives the pair to White. He tells her to go get Leo's eyeballs and he would return black as promised. This makes White really sad and she starts crying and says that she wants to be Leo's friend and that he's really similar to them, but Despair says that she can't do that anymore and that all the cards have been dealt and that she must play them as decided. After that, we find out that long ago, during the collision, a flame-like being approached the siblings and was about to take over White's body, but Black stepped up and told it to take it from him if it must and offered his body in exchange for it not messing with his sister. The being agrees and takes over William's body as the King of Despair. We also find out from Femto that the King of Despair has existed from ancient times and has many names like Lucifer, Satan, and the Fallen. With Zed being their newest, most junior member, Leo decides to take it upon himself to show him around the town and invites him to have lunch together. Zap decides to join in as well, but it looks like he just wants to put him down by bullying him and getting himself another lackey like Leo. However, Zed seems to be much more mature for all this BS and decides to shut Zap down with smart replies and decent manners. At first, Zap takes them to a fish food restaurant thinking that Zed wouldn't be comfortable with it as he is half fish. But Zed says that fish eat other fish all the time and that he knows that Zap tried to annoy him, but it just ends up showing his ignorance and his brain being tiny. He then decides to walk in, but Zap says that they would try another place because he doesn't want to eat fish anymore. After that, they continue walking and try a bunch of random food places, including one where the food eats you instead, a place where the chef vomits the food on the plate instead of cooking it, a place where they serve living brain, and a place where they serve a naked fairy man in a bowl of soup. After that, Leo decides to just go heavy on his pocket and takes them to a fine dining place, but there the owner's wife walks in and they both start having a fight out in the open until the wife kills the husband and it ruins their meal. At this point they all start feeling sorry for themselves and just want some decent food and go to a local restaurant, but it turns out a mafia gang attacked them and the owner slayed all of them like John Wick and was serving them as the chef's special today. Seeing this, Leo collapses and Zed and Zap drag him to Vivian's diner in hopes of finally finding something decent to eat there. Vivian welcomes them and gives them an order of hamburgers, and this makes them all cry out of happiness. She also says that Leo now doesn't eat alone anymore and that he seems much happier than before. This makes Leo really happy and he feels blessed to have found a home with Libra. With that, they all decide to take their first bite, but then a massive blaster falls down on top of the diner and breaks through the roof and ruins everything. Zed and Zap protect Vivian and the people around them, and we see Klaus and the others fighting an army of thousands of alien monsters carrying these massive blasters. Klaus tells them to help them clear this mess and then go on to fight them all. While Leo, Zed and Zap were busy looking for a place to eat, Klaus, Blitz, and Steven went to meet the police detective who told them about a shipment of these massive blasters from China that went missing. He says that he would like for them to take care of anyone using them to cause trouble in the city. And that's how we get to the diner where Klaus and the others were fighting the aliens. Besides that, they also receive a request from the League of High Order Spirituals, which is an organization of casters that protected the world by containing the collision. They tell them that a seal in one of the barriers around the city was broken somehow, and they ain't really sure what caused it. They say that it happened around the area where they sealed the last Elder Class blood breed and that it all sounds too fishy. That's why they would like them to stay vigilant until they find a way to repair the barrier and find what caused it to break. He also tells them that long ago when the collision happened, a couple of casters went missing and no one knows what happened to them. But from that incident, the two children of those chasters did manage to make it out, and one of them was even working for the League, referring to William. At the same time, we see the King of Despair walking through the streets of Hellsalem's lot as he runs into a beat-up woman who seems to be running away from her chasers. He lets her go and then walks into an alleyway where he meets the two chasers and tells them that he wants to play a game, and if they win he would help them catch that girl. He then asks them if they know his real name, which makes one of them mad and he tries to push him aside, but suddenly he pops like a balloon and makes a mess. This makes the other guy really scared and he tries to run away, but Despair corners him and asks him the same question, and tells him that if he answers incorrectly he will pop him like a balloon as well. Back at the restaurant, Zap ends up getting sick after eating sushi and gets admitted to the hospital. Once there, Leo runs into White who tells him that she would like to talk to him in private. They both walk to the graveyard and into the old chapel where White sits down and says that she wants to make a prayer for his safety. Leo wonders what she was talking about. Just then the King of Despair walks in and says that she is just lying and that in reality she wants to pray for herself. With that, White looks at Leo and says that she wants him to give her his all-seeing eyes of God. With this, we get a flashback of White thinking back on her life. She was born in Macbeth to Benjamin and Emma Macbeth and had a twin brother named William. Their family came from a long line of casters who were considered to be the people with special powers. They used these powers for the good of society and this earned them a good name in the world. But then there was her, Mary Macbeth, the dark spot of their family. Despite both of her parents being casters, she was born with not a shred of special powers. On the other hand, her brother, William, was born with all of it, but he was a wimpy loser who didn't know how to control his powers and would end up crying at the smallest of things. Despite that, she still considered herself to be the one that brought shame to her family, but unlike most anime, her parents turn out to be really decent fellas and they love her as their daughter and don't want to push any ideas or goals on them that they ain't excited about themselves. As William grows up, he stops using his powers and says that he doesn't want to be a caster. They both still feel really proud to see their parents help people all around the world whenever they go on one of their missions, but William seems to have developed his own philosophy about his powers. Mary doesn't like that one bit, but her father convinces her that this just means that William has become brave enough to control his powers and stop them from going wild. He tells her how they are both meant to help each other and support each other in their lives. As time passes, Mary adopts a hobby of capturing pictures of things that she likes. One night, William gets up and takes a picture of his sleeping sister because he really cares for her and decides to treasure it. The next day, a group of bullies take Mary's camera and walk away. William decides to get it back, but they throw it into the river and William jumps after it without even knowing how to swim. Later on, he wakes up at a hospital with Mary by his side and she cries and calls him stupid. She says that the camera was replaceable, but she didn't know what she would do with herself if he had died, and this makes both of them cry out loud. Later that night, they both talk to each other and William tells her that one time when they were little, he brought a shiny ball of mud to show him, but he got jealous because he wasn't as good at making those and blew it on her face. But to his surprise, she simply got back to making a new ball and he felt so pathetic. That day, he decided to never use his powers again and to work on his own to become a great man. He then shows the picture of her that he treasures and she hugs him and calls him a good brother. After that, she tells him that it would be unfair to not use his powers when he has them and encourages him to train and polish his skills. She supports him in every way possible until they grow up and Will joins his parents as a caster as well. But then the day of collision comes and Mary rushes to find her parents and brother who got caught at the center of this mess. There, she finds William standing in front of a big ball of blue flames. This blue flame turns out to be none other than the King of Despair himself, and this is when William tells him to take his body instead of his sister and to keep her out of all this. Now coming back to the present, we see White putting the glasses on Leonardo's eyes which make him lose control of his body, and he falls down. The King of Despair then picks him up and drags him down to his lair where he uses Leonardo's eyes to find one of the seals that make up the barrier around the city and breaks it apart, setting off explosions in the city. He says that while death is inevitable, it is also what gives meaning to life. But to him who is eternal, this eternity is the biggest form of despair. He also reveals that Mary doesn't have a heart and her parents put a special seal in its place which lets her live. After using the eyes so intensively, he starts coughing blood and then goes back to the chapel and sits down with an unconscious Mary. He then says that he truly loved her and then shoots her heart with a gun, saying he will take himself down with this collapse. On the other hand, we see Femto looking at the city from a tower as he says that the King of Despair has certainly chosen a really dull day for his great collapse. After that, he goes to where Leo is being held and wakes him up. He tries to play a game of coin toss with him where he would answer any of his questions if he wins and would simply keep him there forever if he loses. Leo says that he has no questions that he wants answered from him and refuses to play the game, which disappoints Femto, and he lets him go. After that, he goes back to the chapel and tells the King of Despair that Leo didn't play their game, which makes him really annoyed. He says that he must not let the boy get out, but decides to give up on that plan and welcomes him to see the last moments of this city with him. As the barrier collapses, the city starts going crazy with gravity changing at places and buildings moving randomly. To add to the chaos, Femto turns a bunch of people into ghouls and says that an apocalypse without zombies is just boring, and that the people of this city need good entertainment. Libra and the city's forces fight against all these things and try to keep things under control while Sonic reaches Leo and gives him his camera with White's last recording where she asks Leo to save them. On the other hand, casters from around the world arrive at Hellsalem's lot and they start repairing the barrier, but one piece of it seems to be missing. They believe that the missing piece must be in Benjamin's daughter, as their parents were suspected of using the forbidden arts where they converted their life force into a special barrier that stabilizes the barrier around the city and draws power from it to sustain Mary. But now she has gone missing, and it looks like she is trying her best to keep the city from completely collapsing and starting another event like the Great Collision. After looking at White's video, Leo decides to go find William and save him from the King of Despair alongside Mary and uses his eyes to locate him. He runs towards him and on his way gets a lot of help from his colleagues at Libra. They save him from the random deadly rubble that seems to be dropping out of nowhere and also give him a boost to reach the King of Despair. Meanwhile, Klaus makes it to the chapel and meets the villain himself. The King of Despair tells him to get lost as he's not waiting for him, but Klaus says that he isn't there to talk to him either and that he is looking for William. Just then, a random-ass piece of rock flies in and is about to kill the King of Despair, but Klaus protects him, and this amuses Despair a lot. He says that there are always heroic characters like Klaus in every story, but now if he is in a paradigm where he has to protect him from himself, and wishes him luck. Klaus grabs him by his throat and feels conflicted as he doesn't want to hurt William but can't separate Despair from him either. He further protects him from a bunch of random rubble flying their way and try to use talk no jutsu on him, but Despair sends him back flying using his psychic powers and says that William is long gone. Just then, Leo arrives on the scene and says that that's not true and that he can see the real William standing right beside him and crying that he wants to live. He then calls out to Mary and says that he knows that she can hear him and lets her manifest herself in the spiritual world as a cracked up barrier. He tells her that he's there to save her and then uses his eyes' powers to project his vision on Despair, and lets him see Mary as well. Seeing her, William manages to regain his consciousness and Despair seems to have gone out of his body for good. He hugs Mary and cries and says that he doesn't want to live in a world without her, but she says that they must save the world like their parents and tells him to man up and do the right thing. With these words of encouragement, William says that he doesn't have enough power left to repair her, so he wants her to give him the rest of whatever power she has left, and then he would use it to reenact the barrier and stabilize it. Mary agrees and the barrier gets repaired and everyone is saved except Leo and Will, who lost one of the most precious people to them. Leo walks up to Klaus and he tells him that he's really proud of him for saving the world and that he's glad he hired him when he did. Leo agrees and thanks him for the praise, but then starts crying as he thinks about White and how he lost the only chance of becoming a man, as no other girl will ever date his lousy ass. Will looks at him from the side and says that he looks brave even when he is crying and that he is their hope. After that, things start going back to normal and everyone continues with their routines in this crazy city at the border of two worlds. And that's how Season 1 of Blood Blockade Battlefront comes to its end. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so you never miss a future video. And until next time guys, take care.